Let's go.
You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Welcome back to Making Data Simple. We're back again today. This is like part 2 with Roger Premo. As you heard last week, and you got to go back and listen to last week, Roger is the General Manager, Corporate Strategy and Ventures. We're going to discuss the 10 truths with him again today. Last week, we talked about the first 5 truths were really around GenAI. Today, we're going to go through 6 through 10. We're going to talk about cloud, 6 through 10 truths, and I'm going to ask him some questions on it. So this is perfect for me. Welcome back, Roger. We're like spending every day with one another these days. How you been?
I've been good, yeah. And we were on an internal IBM discussion. Your team is fantastic, Al. It was great to spend time with them yesterday, too.
Yeah, they got to ask you some of the same questions we're about to do today. So I thought it was really good. Thank you for spending so much time with us. How would you like to begin? Would you like to go through like each truth and then kind of dissect it for 5 minutes? Or you like to hit all 6 through 10 and then come back? What do you think?
Let's just go through them one by one, Al, and let's do just a brisk browse because I think we want to get back to IBM too and what we're doing about it. And
Yes.
I expect we'll get back into AI as well. But
you can't go through a podcast without mentioning AI at some point in time. It's just the rule, I think, of the rule.
We just made it 90 seconds before we used the word AI. So
yeah, that's right.
Before we get there, let's just talk, obviously IBM's on this hybrid cloud and AI strategy. We hit the AI. And the hybrid cloud side of it is very important too. If you look at our hybrid cloud strategy, it comes from this recognition of what's going on in the market and where our clients are running their technology. So if you look at cloud overall, let's start before we get into the truths. State of cloud today, it is creeping up on being, a $500 billion business across all the players that are involved in it. It's transformational to our economy. Like startup economy exists on this thing. I was at a startup way back in the day where I remember in the pre-cloud era, we had a SaaS business and we were always in this conflict between buy a server versus hire a developer when these used to be on these big giant servers. You think of how that model of rent capacity changes innovation. It really is profound, right? But then you get into the truths. And, the first big truth is that cloud transformation in the enterprise to date has not delivered ROI. And this is work that McKinsey and Company have done. There's similar studies from IBM's Institute for Business Value, similar studies from Deloitte. But if you look at the first wave of digital transformation that was done in the enterprise, I think most people remember the chief digital officer. That's companies in circa 2016, 17 hired a chief digital officer. They said, we'll become a digital company. And they looked at a lot of the cloud native companies and said, I'll be like that, and tried to repeat that. That just didn't work. The starting point for a large global company is much more complex than a greenfield startup. And so the McKinsey data on this that look back at 80 or so clients that have gone through their cloud transformations found that the ROI on the first generation of cloud transformations was plus 10% to negative 5%. And that was versus forecasts that were triple digit ROIs, massive transformational exercises that they intended. But the results were this kind of negligible to negative return. And that's all in the context of what's going on inside of these businesses. If you look at CEOs around the world, across industries, they will put digital transformation or technology-driven transformation on the top 3 lists of things they have to get done in their business. And that's not when you ask them about what are your technology priorities. Those are core business priorities. And so in so many industries around the world, innovation with technology is now, a matter of winning and losing in industries for so many of the big companies out there. And you compare that with the fact that they haven't delivered in the first couple of generations of digital transformation. It's a painful truth for many of our clients on what's going on inside of their business.
Look, when I saw this one probably gave me the most pause, I think. Given the move to cloud we've seen. And as I look at it, minus 5 to 10%. And then on one hand, I'm thinking, well, look, there was a lot of like boards saying, hey, you must modernize. So they're going to cloud whether they need it or not. So they're taking a data center that was working fine, probably well optimized over many years, and then trying to move to cloud. And then What I've known from cloud is you over provision, or that's the natural inclination. You over provision because you want to be safe. So you're spending more money. This is why at IBM here, we've got resource optimization technologies like Turbonomic and Instana that are doing extremely well because they measure that resource optimization. But on the other hand, is there a yes, but or something? In other words, I would imagine if you go talk to many of these companies, they'd say, yes, but we did this modernization. Yes, but here's what we're trying to get to. I got to believe they wouldn't accept that hands down because that would just make you, well, why ever move to cloud?
I'd say I see a lot of actual acceptance of that fact. The reality is most of the people that stood on stage and said, we'll be a digital company, 8 or 10 years ago, aren't the same leaders in place. So I think we do have a generation of technology leaders inside our clients that, want to take a different path. And it's up to us to help them with that path, because I don't think that there is there's no fundamental defect in the DNA of a big company versus a small company. They can do this. And we know the outlier proof points of companies that have done this at scale. So it's possible. It's just that it's difficult. If you think of just the starting position of saying, I'm moving to the cloud, but a company that may have spent a decade or 4 decades investing, building technology capabilities, the notion that that was simply going to move to cloud and transform over a period of 3 to 5 years, if you just look at it from that context, it was a heavy lift, right? So I do see a lot of recognition of that among CIOs, CTOs that I talk with. And I think the question is, how do we change the odds for this generation of leaders so they can actually accomplish their goals?
Do you actually see a movement back to the data center? Or no, you're not going that far. You're not saying that. You're just...
I think there certainly are, you mentioned some of the capabilities. I'd also add Apptio from our side, so you can really track the cost benefit of these technologies. You are seeing some places where, the bill, to your point, the bill on the cloud was bigger than anticipated. And there are some repatriation of some workloads where there's just a better price performance when you run it yourself at scale. I think that's for really scaled players where they can kind of get the large economics of big workloads that they manage themselves. That is happening, but I'd say that's less a mega trend than just some opportunistic optimization among clients. But I don't think it's not the start of a wave back from cloud. I think it's just a handful of workloads that have a price performance that's better if you manage it yourself. But I'd say it's a minor trend, not a major trend.
One other thought that I'd like your comment on is what I have seen is if we're looking at a Z mainframe, if I look even 5 years ago, IBM has had the long pole in the tent there. I mean, we've got the mainframe. Essentially, nobody else has it. Clear differentiation. Runs about every financial institution on the planet. And look, there was a lot of FUD out there, I would say, trying to pull out the mainframe as legacy, quote unquote, which I never freaking understood because like cars have been around since the early 1900s and we don't consider them legacy. And even before I came to IBM, I didn't know any better. I come in and I see performance, reliability, durability. I mean, I can go down the list. I mean, amazing, amazing technology. So 5 years ago, it was like the competitors were trying to pull that long pole in the tent. I don't see that so much anymore. The mainframe is like stronger than ever today. Do you see that?
I do, Al. A few thoughts on that. I mean, I completely agree. I'd say that the challenge is, it's a little bit like calling a Rivian or a Tesla a horseless carriage, right? There's an old noun associated with this modern technology. As you know, I'm the executive advocate for our relationship with AWS. And we actually showed them the performance characteristics of the Z and went through that. And that caused them to change the name of their, quote, mainframe migration practice to mainframe modernization. Because they recognized, they take a very, the classic Amazon retail side, they take a very customer-centric point and they recognize that performance as well. And I think it has that realization, both the things we did directly and the fact that many of these migration attempts failed has led to that. But I think maybe you did hit the nerve on like the mainframe speech for me. The mainframe is it's an unbelievably performant machine. And I think actually NVIDIA has done us a favor by helping people realize that compute is not just a generic pool that you distribute against. There's purpose-built silicon systems, software that are better fit for workloads. And so I think the whole world realizes, hey, if you're going to do generative AI training, that's probably going to be on NVIDIA. There's a lot, and you see it in NVIDIA's market capitalization. That same kind of fit for purpose thinking works for these critical transactional workloads that are like the core of so many businesses. And then the last thing I'll say on mainframe is I had a guy on one of my teams that retired, and he was part of that, mainframe transformation a couple decades ago. I think people take the word mainframe and associate it with kind of old but I think we've had a fantastic thing flip the wrong way. What we did with the mainframe was one of the most fantastic acts of customer centricity in the history of the technology industry. It was like doing a gut renovation of the house where all you left was the paint on the outside and changed everything underneath in the technology. And we kept the backwards compatibility of, COBOL code that was written, before maybe some of us were born, and allow it to run on today's platform today. Somehow that's framed as a negative rather than an incredible positive of protecting people's investments they've made and customer centricity. And, pick your mobile phone. Like I have these apps on a mobile phone that like for my kids, like we've got them on the old phones, like this doesn't work with version X.Y. There's no other technology platform in the world that is that customer centric, that it ensures backwards compatibility, more than like, we're talking a couple decades, and most places are like a couple years. And so, somehow that story has been framed as a negative, not a positive. And it's incredibly customer centric. It runs the backbone of like the world economy. And the mainframe is this incredible performant machine. Al, you know the story, but for some of the listeners, like what we've done to bring AI into the mainframe so that you can apply AI in the midst of a transaction. So you can do advanced fraud modeling, to see if a credit card transaction should go through or not on the fly. The innovation on the mainframe continues just at a remarkable pace. That machine is incredibly modern, incredibly performant, and it's going to be a core piece of the technology industry for many years to come, because we've got this brilliant team that keeps innovating it and pushing it forward and keeps it, again, like it crossed its 60-year anniversary, but like what's in that box today is, that's more like 2030 technology than 1960s technology.
Totally agree. Competitors are going to try to pull at it, try to create misinformation, but it's unbelievable.
And just like the whole world, the same thing. If you think of NVIDIA, where they have incredible differentiation on the GPU for model training, the whole world, the whole world's gunning for them. And
yes.
If your Kansas City Chiefs helmet on the back there, the whole world's gunning for the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, that the mainframe is on top for those types of workloads. NVIDIA is on top for a lot of AI workloads. And if you're on top, you're a conspicuous target.
Come on, man, leave the Chiefs alone. We need a few more Super Bowls. We need more Super Bowls.
I'm a Lions fan. We came, a couple games away. It was painful to see us drop out last year.
Yeah, well, I think your coach, he was gambling a lot, and a lot of them worked out until the very end, I think, and that kind of bit him in the butt in the end.
Yeah, but we got Jared Goff was great. We also don't have a magician like Patrick Mahomes and that could make anything happen.
Yes.
Maybe let's jump to Truth 2, Al. So Truth 2 is that we're in the back 5. So Truth 7, I should say, is that, hybrid multi-cloud is the enduring norm for our clients. And so when we bought Red Hat, we bought it on, we'll talk about a few of these bets we made, but one was just that hybrid multi-cloud was it was the enduring future for our customers. And so we track, there are so many organizations that track this, but Gartner, IDC, we track it ourselves in IBM Institute for Business Value. But if you look at the technology environments of our clients running across data centers, traditional workloads, private clouds, the public clouds they're on, the SaaS architectures they're on, the emergence of edge workloads really going from an idea to a reality, the direction of travel is more hybrid, more heterogeneous than less. So I think, the operating hypothesis that began a lot of that cloud transformation that failed, the operating hypothesis was that the world was going to move to a singular technology stack, and that's where innovation would occur. And the opposite has happened. And, that's for good reason, right? If you think of, hybrid is great in that it allows the business to bring technology wherever it needs it. If it is, I want to run it in Google, I want to run it in Microsoft, I want to run it in my data center, I want to run it at the edge because that's where my business happens in the real world. The hybrid multi-cloud allows that technology to be where the business needs it, but it has this heterogeneity and complexity that is a consequence of that. And if you go back to the McKinsey data, one of the big factors that got in the way of ROI was the complexity tax of all the things that move to not just a cloud, but move to multiple different clouds. And heterogeneity just creates skill challenges, complexities, gaps in security, a multiplier on compliance, multiplier on the operating teams you have to run these environments. So complexity is kind of one of these core pain points that we're pointing our strategy at helping us solve this complexity problem for our clients, because that complexity is one of the core underlying root causes of why that first generation of cloud transformation did not generate the value we wanted.
Makes sense.
The last thing I'll say on that just is the word SaaS. I think one of the big changes in the hybrid multi-cloud over the last several years also is that I think software as a service is 20 plus years old. SaaS is old enough to get a beer at the bar, and Salesforce was founded in '99. Think about that. SaaS is actually 25. But now that environment has gone from being a sidecar in the technology environment, is run on the side. Now we need to integrate it into the hybrid multi-cloud because we need that data to do a lot of the analytics and AI. My SaaS applications become something I need to consider in my technology environment as an integrated component. So the direction of travel for our clients is getting more and more heterogeneous. And frankly, now I need to think about my GPU clouds, or I need to think about all these new exotic workloads coming online. There's no limit we can see to how much more of that heterogeneity will keep progressing.
So several questions on this. First one is just very simple. Last week you were talking about GenAI, and number 2 was multi-cloud deployments. Is this just the same? It's just you're doubling down because now we're talking about cloud?
Yes. Yeah.
Fair enough.
I'd say the flip. This impacts the AI, right? The environments of our clients are hybrid multi-cloud period before you get to the AI. And then because they want to bring the AI to wherever that technology environment is, their AI becomes hybrid multi-cloud. Our clients want to deliver that technology wherever the business needs it. And increasingly, the AI is a core component of what they're bringing there.
So where do we stand today? What's the percentage wise? I mean, if you look at workloads and where we expect to be, if you look at SaaS or cloud versus private cloud versus on-prem, what's the percentages, and is this expected, and where do you think we're going?
We're in a world, I'm going to do this from memory out, but we're in a world where it's roughly 40% of the world's workloads are kind of on-prem in some form. If it's the data center or it's edge locations. Edge is exploding, right? That is an enormous growth vector. So I think we may find that you end up with this, more of the workload out in the world and not in the cloud. Cloud is the other 60%, and it's still growing fast as well. But the data center is still growing. So the main thing is back to technology is a core priority for practically every business in the world. You think of, all of us living in the technology industry, we're living with just a huge tailwind in our back. Software is eating the world, technology is eating the world. It is growing faster than the macro economy. And that means all categories are growing. And you have newer things like edge that are growing much faster. You have kind of relatively new things like cloud that are still growing fast. But you still have private clouds, on-prem private clouds are still a growth category. And you see it in the performance of if you looked at Dell's performance lately, some of the server vendors, you look at our performance and how well the Z, for instance, is doing this cycle versus prior, you just see that resurgence as well.
One more. And that is, look, I think we got this right at IBM. We did the investment of Red Hat significant investment. I remember when we were doing it, some people were scratching their heads, but it's all about hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, being able to modernize now. We have 50%, over 50% market share with OpenShift, our Kubernetes platform. The infrastructure you can provision. Point is we've done extremely well there, but are you concerned that the other Kubernetes platforms will catch us?
Can we pause? Let's get to Truth 10, because I think Truth 10 really hits that right on the head, Al.
Okay, perfect.
And we'll get to it. But I think it's a very important question to wrap our heads around. To give a little preview of it, though, I think if we're having a conversation about just pure Kubernetes engine, I think that's the wrong question. I think we should get to kind of what is my application platform? And I think if you frame it like that, then I think the decision's much more obvious. And I think actually if you ask a client what they need, it more is that application platform than just something to run my Kubernetes containers. But
very
we'll
fair.
Come back to that.
All right, let's go on to Truth 8.
Truth 8 is this is not just for large enterprises. And so my team did a bunch of work with the IBM Build ecosystem team. That's who the team that works with software vendors. And if you look at both, if you look at kind of any of the big SaaS vendors out there, Snowflake, Databricks, SAP, you name it, Adobe, they're running in a multi-cloud way. So they've built their platforms to be able to run across different cloud vendors. And that's kind of, you say, okay, I understand that. Those are established brand names. They've been at it for a while. They've expanded to different clouds. But actually, we also asked that same question of younger companies, kind of picked a line of, less than 4 years. So they didn't get their degree yet. And 60% of them were multi-cloud as well. And what we're seeing is that now there's this, if you're a software vendor, on day one, you're going to start in a cloud somewhere. But you quickly get to multi-cloud because today, one of the growth categories for how you do transactions is through these cloud marketplaces. And so much of the way customers want to buy is through their cloud pre-commits. So if you're not in the cloud where your client is running and has pre-committed spend, you don't play as a software vendor. And so we just see this enormous pull, even for young companies, to get into a multi-cloud architecture really quickly, both because they want some flexibility of where they run, they want to take advantage of some of the unique services in each of those clouds. But at the end of the day, it's because their clients care. And I think, maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago, back to that SaaS being kind of a sidecar was managed differently. It used to be this kind of norm that clients didn't care where the SaaS ran. That's not true anymore. They know where it runs because they're trying to co-locate workloads for performance, and they're trying to consolidate all their spending under these kind of common contracts. So we're seeing small ISVs that are designing for multi-cloud, kind of from not day one. Like I said, you're got to get some basic function running, but like from day two, they're really thinking multi-cloud.
Here's my question on this one. Just really one question. And that is, if I am a small enterprise, let's say I'm a small business, maybe I'm even a startup. I mean, maybe a startup's not fair. Can I afford to do multi-cloud? Then I'm going to have some sort of Kubernetes engine. We're going to have some like OpenShift. Is it affordable? I guess the question is it affordable, and how do I get started small if I'm an SMB?
So I'm going to break SMBs into two categories, Al. There's a bunch of SMBs that are not technology businesses. Those businesses will consume SaaS services. I think, we're going to see more mid-market SMB that will have no kind of formal IT team. They're going to purchase everything as SaaS. But if you're one of those technology SMBs that's building tech as your core business, and that's who I'm talking about on that multi-cloud trend, yes, it picks up some complexity, but you have no choice. If you start saying, I pick one cloud and my addressable market, I'm going to not run across the other clouds. I'm taking 75% or 60% of my addressable market. I'm saying I'm going to throw that out because clients do care where it runs. So yes, it would be not back to like the complexity problem that got underneath that first wave of cloud transformation. It would be incredibly convenient for everybody if everybody picked one singular technology stack and we could all run there. but that hasn't happened. And so we need to run where our customers demand it. So if you're a small technology innovator, you will get pulled to multi-cloud because your end customers demand it. And so while it takes on more cost and complexity, the flip side of growing your business slower is a less attractive option. So you get pulled in that direction.
Makes sense. Look, I think everybody should be on board with multi-cloud at this point in time. I was looking at the statistics. SaaS companies greater than 4 years old, 76% have deployments on multi-clouds. If they're less than 4 years old, it's 69%. So it's more than 2/3 are having deployments on multi-clouds. And I can only imagine that's going to get greater as we move forward. Yep. Fantastic. Truth number 9.
Truth number 9 is that open source is the winning platform across these environments. And so if you look at, first, Al, you talked to it, but if you look at the stats on the adoption of containers and Kubernetes across those workloads, we're seeing that, the majority on cloud, CTOs tell us in the next several years, the majority on cloud will be on containers and Kubernetes. Something like 30-40% will be on-prem. They intend to get to containers and Kubernetes. And that's from a starting position of recognize that's new stuff and modernizing the existing. So that's a pretty ambitious set of goals. That is a recognition that, containers and Kubernetes effectively won as this generation's kind of base technology platform. And, again, that's back to some of the core bets when we bought Red Hat, we were making 2 bets. We were betting that hybrid multi would stick around, and we're betting that Kubernetes would win out as kind of the de facto platform across that. Remember, that was at a time when Pivotal was out there, Pivotal Cloud Foundry was out there, OpenStack was out there, Mesos was out there. There are other contenders for that technology standard. And, one of the gifts Google gave us, Kubernetes is 10 years old this year. Google gave us this gift of Kubernetes that they open sources based on their internal Borg software stack. It was mature enough as a starting point that it could deliver this pretty ambitious goal, which was to be this common cloud platform that could span different environments. And then I mentioned the different open source projects, but really as Kubernetes emerged as this winner, it attracted the open source community to kind of continue to mature Kubernetes. And then to my point on application platform, start building out a series of projects around Kubernetes that really allowed it to be kind of a true DevOps platform and not just a container engine. So open source has won. And, I used to work for Jim Whitehurst when I first started at IBM. I mean, Jim had this great way of thinking about open source, which was in systems, in areas where there's many above and many below. So you have to be compatible with a lot of hardware underneath. You have to be compatible with a lot of application stacks and standards above. That's where open source really wins out, because no one commercial vendor can keep up with the incredible permutations and complexity of all those combinations and support them. It takes that massive community to make that work. And that's why you see for these things that are kind of core platforms, open source is just a better model. And that same trend is now playing out in the AI space. If you look at what's happening with PyTorch, all the work Meta's done, we've leaned into it, but you see emerging open source standards at the machine learning library standard. You see open source, we talked about last time, open source models and the rise of that. You see in the AI category, open source emerging as well. So it is, open source is, here to stay, but it really plays for that kind of core-based platforms that companies need to think about where they really land their innovation.
But if I am an enterprise, I got it. I mean, I totally understand on open source, but if I'm an enterprise, isn't this a decision between building on top of open source versus package ready? And to that point, I mean, I do work with some clients that are building their own Kubernetes or building on top of Kubernetes, and they've got like an army. And I'm thinking, why would you do that? I mean, your business may be financial assets, your business may be insurance, whatever. You got a 5,000 person army just working on Kubernetes when Other companies, namely IBM, have that solved. Why would you waste your time there?
You shouldn't. I think, if you look at Red Hat, I think Red Hat has been this incredibly responsible and effective steward of open source, both, bringing that true open source DNA and supporting open source in a way, doing the versioning, patching, upgrades, compatibility. They've been incredibly kind of responsible stewards of it. And so I talked to the Red Hat team. They went through this same pattern in the Linux days. So big banks that would have a Linux team that was maintaining, patching, updating Linux. And you got to Linux kernel engineer is a single point of failure for your entire bank. Like it ran out of steam. So I think we're seeing the same pattern play out. And I do think there'll be a set of innovators that we do want innovators that are playing with, contributing to extending what Kubernetes and surrounding projects are capable of, for sure. Does that mean that enterprises should commit themselves to having a team that maintains that for the next decade or two to make today's applications forward compatible to the future? I think if you look at the price point of that team versus a Red Hat bill, it's it's an intelligence test. Like one thing is like 20x bigger than the other, probably more. I think we will see many companies that are maintaining their own kind of make that move to buying a commercial package because the economics just don't add up. And then from a talent perspective, you mentioned the clouds that are distributing this. Like the interesting thing on Kubernetes or any open source project is like the leaderboard of who's good at it is out there in the open. It's the contributors that are out there. So like the ability to hang on to a team if they are good is very difficult because this is sought after talent. So if it's Red Hat that wants this talent, if it's Google, if it's AWS, whoever, it is very difficult to hang on to a high caliber Kubernetes team because, if you're a technology vendor like a Red Hat or a Google, you just have more value to get than you would in a IT maintenance model. So a lot of those people, sorry ahead of time, but those are the people that people with that kind of talent are the people that we want to hire in our business, or the people that Google wants to hire in their business. And so open source does have a challenge, and your best talent is also known to the whole world.
I got to ask you this one then. I hear this a lot. I have my own way of answering this. I think I actually asked this in a previous podcast with you as well. But I think what I do hear often, whether it's open source or otherwise, is they're worried about lock-in. What's your comments on lock-in?
A few things. One, any technology architecture has choices, and you got to make choices to innovate. If we want to run our AI in NVIDIA, if we want to run our applications on OpenShift, you have to choose. And if it is one of the choices is, I want to completely control every bit I have, and I'm going to, manage my own open source, or I'm going to build custom from the metal. That has choices, but that's a lock-in to a bill you're going to pay for a long time. So every architecture has choices. I understand many companies have been burned by being single sourced, locked in. I look at open source and Red Hat in particular as both. One, it's based on common underlying technology. So the level of lock-in versus a proprietary technology that's unique, we'd have to completely rewrite if a vendor turned bad on you. There's a different standard in the open source side. And then I look at, Red Hat as an incredibly responsible vendor, and how, there's no point at which they've come back and done, what we've seen in VMware pricing for Broadcom recently, like come back and said, your RHEL is, 10x more expensive than it was yesterday. They've been responsible on this. So I think if the barrier to switch and then the kind of economics and responsibility of that vendor are good, I think, it becomes the price of quote lock-in. I think it's the price of your technology choice. There's very little downside. You think about what OpenShift enables, it enables a lot of switching across different clouds, different environments. So actually, if you kind of looked at the whole weighted scales of lock-in, picking a platform like an OpenShift helps a lot more flexibility on lock-ins to other infrastructure environments than it creates itself. So I think if you're kind of looking at the balanced scorecard of lock-in, picking an open source platform with a vendor like Red Hat probably lowers the overall lock-in tax for the enterprise, much, much more than it creates one.
All right, truth 10. We're at the final truth.
This is literally the money ball. Truth 10 is that a hybrid by design approach breaks that ROI bottleneck we talked about. And so we are now in, year 4.5 of the hybrid cloud and AI strategy for IBM. If you follow the classic, like crossing the chasm technology adoption cycle, when we started, we went out with the early adopters, the companies that leaned in with us. They bet their businesses, they bet their innovation on that platform approach. And now when we look at it and we can we did this with IBM Consulting last year. IBM Consulting, like any of the very good, consulting and system integrators in the world, they have their technology value calculators. And so when we take the value of going with a platform approach, and we're calling that hybrid by design, doing hybrid cloud, but building platforms that abstract away a lot of that underlying heterogeneity that we talked about. When we look at the companies that do that, they get 3x higher ROI on digital transformation than the ones that are in those fragmented silos. We call that hybrid by default. And so now we've had those early adopters that have come on that journey with us. We've gone from believing we could deliver value to being able to economically prove it. So the winners on digital innovation in their respective industries are the companies that take a hybrid by design approach and build with, platforms spanning that heterogeneity. And so we now know that we can talk to our clients about it. IBM Consulting has built methodology to help walk clients through that journey. Other systems integrators are building methodology to do something similar. And we can look our clients in the eye and say, back to the question you asked about a Kubernetes engine in one cloud versus another, the main thing that we deliver is a platform. And in each generation of technology, we've been taught, we keep relearning the lesson that platforms drive better innovation at a better economic value. And we're seeing the same pattern in this generation, leveraging OpenShift as the best application platform to span environments. So we may get into whose Kubernetes is better, but if it doesn't enable a platform where you can, for that starting point, our clients are hybrid multi-cloud. They are in these multiple environments. If you just buy a Kubernetes in one cloud, it doesn't solve that heterogeneity problem. And it still leads to this multiplier effect on the skills, the development tools, the security practices, the compliance practices, the operational practices, that multiplier effect, because you're not just buying the Kubernetes engine from one cloud, you're buying it from the second and third cloud, and you're doing something on premise and you're doing something at the edge. Picking a platform just takes so much of the complexity and kind of cost out of it. And frankly, it also just speeds innovation. When we looked at it with IBM Consulting, the main driver of that 3x, about half of it, was faster innovation, faster time to market, faster growth of new customer experiences, new sources of revenue. And then it took out a ton of cost because you dropped out that complexity tax. And so we had the early adopters that started with us. If you look, classic kind of Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm, the early majority wanted proof points. And now we can go to that early majority and say, here are the proof points of why hybrid by design is a better way to innovate inside your business and solve that core ROI challenge that McKinsey study identified. We can break through that digital transformation, cloud transformation ROI equation. And it's, again, not surprising, but the base technology complexity was one of the core root causes that we can help solve and get our clients to a better place. So, hybrid by design, I'm super excited about. And, the IBM Consulting team that did that quantification, it was just outstanding work. And it's just, to me, why am I more excited about our strategy than ever is because we've gone from thinking the strategy had value to kind of definitive proof. And we can walk out, to our clients and say, if you bet with IBM, your bets are going to turn out better.
So let me summarize, but then with a two-part question on this. Companies adopting hybrid by design deliver more than 3x higher ROI. I got that. That's awesome. It's profound. But here's the two-part question. I mean, it's easy to say, extremely difficult to do. if I'm a listener, like I'm thinking hybrid by design, I'm thinking, yeah, Roger, I'm with you, but I don't even control half my organization. It's a freaking spaghetti of different departments, everybody doing their own thing. How do I get my hands around that? That's number one. And number two is, and we kind of learned this from the last client briefing we had, maybe, is do you have to look at ROI a little bit differently? And the reason I say that is because, like, if I have 1,000 developers today, I implement GenAI, it's not like you're going to get rid of 200 developers as a result. I suppose you could, but a lot of times you have that same 1,000 developers. So my cost remains the same. Am I more optimal? Am I getting more done? Potentially. But I guess the question is, do I have to look at ROI a little bit differently than I've done in the past?
So two things. On the getting started side of it, I'd kind of say the easy part and the hard part. I think the easy part, and so we've certainly been drinking our own champagne. So our CIO, Matt Lightson, has driven hybrid by design into the IBM IT shop. And if you ask Matt what he did start with a bunch of easy tasks. They had a bunch of different container engines, the pivotals, all these things spun up. So first it was, start by kind of collapsing a lot of that complexity in a way that, the end developer never notices. But they had to build up to more and more deliberate platforms over time. So there is a build up to it approach. I think we also shouldn't shy away from the big conversation. So I was with the president of a large US bank, and, I think it's very interesting that, the leadership team of these businesses now is so technology fluent. But what came from that is, here's the president of a US bank, and we're talking about OpenShift, and he's across 3 different clouds, and he's paying a multi-hundred million dollar a year compliance bill to do compliance across those environments. He said, wait a second, if I went to OpenShift, could I cut my compliance bill by 2/3? It's like, yes, you could. And so sometimes it does take a top of the house conversation to really say, we are going to innovate our business in a very different way. So we want to do the bottoms up grassroots, but I don't want to shy away from the top of the house conversation that says to, the C-suite, you will all succeed or fail based on how well your digital technology transformation goes. And you need to help your organization embrace the platforms that will facilitate that. So I think we have to have a bottoms up getting started fast, but we have to, not shy away from that big top of the house conversation, because it is like this, if the bottoms up isn't going to get to true platforms, then we're doing our clients a disservice, because we're going to let that heterogeneity persist. That heterogeneity is going to slow them down. And ultimately they won't do well. IBM won't do well. Red Hat won't do well. So I think it's an important conversation to keep pushing on. At the end of the day, the technology exists to support the business. Technology is becoming more and more fundamental to whether or not the business succeeds or not. But you have to have a handle. I mean, at the level of investment that technology is becoming for so many enterprises, you have to have a handle on the returns of it. And I went straight from that client conversation you're referring to the Technology Business Management Council that next weekend in Vancouver. And so at the flip side, it was like a bunch of CIOs. It's chaired by the CIO of State Farm, that are so fundamentally grounded in technology investments to business management. So I walked into an audience that was completely on the other side of that equation. And I think what that group would tell you is that in the long run, you want to allow some experimentation to go through. So you're not like, there's not a massive ROI proof point process you put every technology project through. You want some experimentation to flourish. But at the end of the day, a discipline, and I encourage everybody to check out the Technology Business Management. Really, it is the discipline to help technology teams link what they do to how it impacts the business. And I think for a lot of the CIOs, CTOs in that room, it's helped them succeed in their careers, because it gives a language by which to explain technology to business leaders that aren't technology savvy, and helps facilitate, more investment. Anyway, I just say, ROI still matters, because at the end of the day, ROI means that the business is winning, and technology doesn't exist for technology's sake. It exists to enable what we accomplish inside the business.
Look, ROI absolutely matters. It's all about ROI at the end of the day. Hopefully, I'm objective. I have a lot of external companies that come on this podcast. Some of them, while smaller, they're even competitive with IBM. But I like to hear about all technology. But in terms of the client zero you mentioned, we have done a fabulous job, but it's profound in terms of what we've done with Client Zero. We got Ask IT, Ask HR. We've got FinOps with Aptio and Turbo that are doing resource optimization across our business. In fact, that's a lot of the demos we do to clients to show here's what we've done. Sometimes we go live on our system. It's absolutely fantastic. My last question is this. Very simply, we've went through 10 truths on GenAI and cloud. How would you summarize this?
I'd summarize it simply that, we know that the hybrid multi-cloud is that where our clients will innovate, and an open source platform allows them to get better innovation out of that. And generative AI and AI in general will be the key technology that helps unlock new sources of value on top of that hybrid multi-cloud platform. And so, but we've built that, at IBM, we've built that in a way that anticipates a lot of the needs we talked about on governing and securing it well, high ROI use cases, models with the right price performance. So, we've really across our business kind of tried to look ahead to what are the future technology needs for our clients at really that total business innovation, both traditional workloads and new AI workloads, and said, what are the requirements to deliver that to the enterprise? And today's portfolio isn't just there because it happens to be. It's there because of brilliant work across so many IBMers to anticipate what was coming and build two platforms, OpenShift and watsonx. They're built to explicitly to deliver enterprise-grade innovation that delivers a better return on investment back to our clients. So the whole company is purpose-built around that value proposition. So I just think it's a great, and you talked about it in IBM, we're drinking our own champagne and we see like incredible benefits, like applications with a 90% cost per application reduction, faster innovation. So we're seeing in our business, we see in our clients that have been lead adopters. We can look our clients in the eye and say, partnering with IBM is your best bet to, basically innovate the future of your business.
Look, thank you, Roger. I greatly appreciate you being here. You helped me out a lot. I'm a little envious because you get to talk strategy every day, but I take what you provide. Like I'm going to state of Missouri. They've invited me on a panel discussion this afternoon. I've got SEC media days that I've got to do. It's all because of all the information you give me. And then I debate it, talk with my team. Look, terrific. I appreciate you and all that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Hey, and Al, right back at you. Just your team, and like I learned from your team because you guys are seeing what's happening at the front lines, and you've got this combination of a pulse on the market and technical depth together. The feeling is very mutual. So thanks for the time. And, I love our annual tradition of doing the Simple podcast.
We'll keep it going. Going. Thank you again. And podcast listeners, I'll talk to you next time. Hit us at almartintalksdata@gmail.com. As always, I'll see you on the podcast. See you all.